I always say to the families I work with and the staff I work with that, even if families are poor, if they don't speak English, if they're recent immigrants, like it's really about trying to support them to create a stable household because that is often the key of what creates healthy attachment and self-esteem and confidence to become a healthy adult.
Hello, and welcome to A Work in Purpose. This is our podcast for igniting and reaching our purpose together. My name is Wing. Like many of you, I am just an ordinary seeker. During the great pause of 2020, when all of the external distractions suddenly disappeared, I, like so many of us, had a lot of time to reflect and discover inward. I eventually wondered and got stuck on one of life's most perplexing questions. What is my life's purpose? And I know I am not the only one. That is why I am inviting you to join me on this journey. Let's discover, ignite, and reach our purpose together. On most weeks, I'll be sharing a podcast episode of me interviewing people from all walks of life who are working towards some kind of purpose, whether it is with their career, volunteering, creativity, spiritual practices, or just how they approach everyday life. Along the way, I'll also be sharing some insights and practical tips I learned on how to discover and reach our purpose. I hope they will inspire you so we can all become a working purpose. And if you would like to be a part of a supportive community of other seekers to help you reach your purpose, I invite you to join our Facebook group, A Work in Purpose. For our very first episode, our guest is Yensing Sihapanya. She's the Executive Director at Family Connection Center, a family service organization in San Francisco. She has spent her entire career providing services to families, including homeless families, LGBT families, and immigrant families. She has to be the most effective get things done person I've ever known. She's also one of my closest friends, yet strangely, I really don't know much about her past history. In this episode, we'll dive into why Yensing has developed such a sense of purpose in helping families and how her own background as a part of a refugee family coming from Laos might have shaped that. Lastly, she'll share some practical advice for those who want to thrive in a career serving communities and families. So let's get started. Hello, Yensing. How's it going?
Hi, Wing. Good morning.
Good
I'm
morning.
very excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you on this podcast. Thanks for being the first guest. So, Yensing, as you know, the purpose of this podcast is to talk about our purpose. So, can you share what you do currently? Who is Yensing?
Oh wow, that's a big question, but I would try to do my best. Elevator spiel. Like you said, I am currently the executive director of a wonderful nonprofit called Family Connection Center. Um, I always say I'm the luckiest girl in the world to have my job. So I'm not just being a little bit biased because I'm the executive director, but I really do feel that way. Um, who is Yensing? As far as work, I've dedicated most of my life, professionally and personally, to a variety of social justice causes, whether that's LGBT rights, reproductive justice, uh, supporting youth in incarcerated jails, homeless families, and right now, our family coalition, we really focus on a really wide wraparound continuum of programs to support young children and their parents and their caregivers, everybody from grandparents to aunts, uncles, and whoever is in their household. And most of the families and children we serve are low income and immigrant families who really need a bridge and a community to succeed and thrive.
Oh, awesome. So, you've mentioned that you work in several organizations related to family services. You work for a homeless shelter that caters to families and an LGBT organization that caters to families. And now you are working for a community center that caters to family. So there's a thread of family throughout your most of your career. Can you tell me why you have such a deep connection to helping families? Where did that come from?
Oh, that's a fascinating question because I often joke that I can't work for an agency unless there's family in the name, because the last three agencies I worked for the last 15 years have all had family in the name. Um, but I don't think it's I don't think it's necessarily been on purpose I've worked with families. I think my goal is to it's it's to be of service. It's my goal with my work and with my life is one, to be of service, and two, to be happy. It is that service serving me, um and somehow I've just been able to stumble upon these agencies that I feel really connected to, that I feel that I'm good at my job. Um, and you're right. Like there's a little golden thread that runs through them, but it has to do with family, and maybe subconsciously. And now purposefully in my current job, we say that we are focused on a multi generational model, because you can't really impact kids if you are not working with their caregivers and their families. They may be with you for 2 to 8 hours a day, but the people who are there with the rest of their lives, and who are there, for the other 16 hours a day, are their families, and vice versa. Like, you can't support, a parent or a caregiver if you are not really able to support, one of the biggest challenges in their lives, and that's being a parent and being a caregiver. So really having that holistic model of supporting somebody, it's supporting the unit that they call their family.
Mhm. Yeah. Can you tell us more about your family background? I know that you had quite an interesting upbringing and your family went through quite a bit, right? Can you share some stories about that? Where they come from? How they
Yeah,
get to
yeah.
America?
So my family came. My father is Chinese Vietnamese. My mother's Laotian, and my I was born in Laos. And my family refugee. We were refugees that came to America. We spent some time in refugee camps in the Philippines before we came to America.
How old were you when you were there?
I came to America when I was 6 years old. So I was in a refugee camp when I was around six. So I think we were there for around 6 months. It's a very big refugee camp that serves as one of the primary entry sites into America during the 80s, when a lot of immigrants were immigrating from Southeast Asia. Um, so I was in the refugee camp when I was 6 years old. Then before I came to the United States, my mother, my father, my four siblings, and myself. So that's six of us. And a thing that a practice that a lot of I don't know a lot, but at least in the refugee camp that we did, is sometimes when you have a single men or single women, they would almost be adopted into families.
Mm,
So my uncle was also with us. He's not my biological uncle, but I mean, honestly, he was in our lives from the time when I was six until I was like 21. He was basically living with my family. It's actually a really great practice, to kind of take these people who are kind of single, and give them a community, and and to a certain extent give those caregivers, my parents who are have five kids, an extra hand as well. So it's myself, my parents, my four siblings, and my uncle. And so we came to the United States. We came to my home still today, San Francisco. Um, what I always say to the families and my staff that I work with and my colleagues is that I don't know if you know about the ACE scores. So ACE are adverse childhood experiences, and studies have shown that you know uh, adults and children who have higher ACE scores are more prone, to having traumatic adulthood. Whether you're able to maintain healthy relationships, more likely to form addiction, more likely to go to jail. We're not saying that ACE scores are the only determinant of whether these things determine who you become as an adult, but they're big factors, right? And you have to address, your childhood traumas. So, but the thing that I would say, at least about my own ACE score, is that it's actually relatively not that high, right? So there's some of the things, some of the ACE score indicators are, for example, have you ever been separated from, your biological parent, via death or via other means? Have you ever been homeless? Have you been physically or sexually or emotionally abused? So I have to say, like, even as powerful as my story is, about being a refugee and my parents leaving our country and going to a refugee camp and crossing the world to the United States, My A score is relatively low because one of the primary factors throughout my entire life is I have a strong family structure. And that can be anything, right? I think not all of us are lucky to have both our parents and our siblings be our core family. But look at my family. We had my uncle who is not biologically my uncle who we met at a refugee camp, and he became part of our core family. So I always say to the families I work with and the staff I work with that even if families are poor, if they don't speak English, if they're recent immigrants, like it's really about trying to support them to create a stable household. Um, because that is often the key of what creates healthy attachment and self-esteem and confidence to become a healthy adult. So
Hmm.
I always say my secret sauce for some reason is that I hope humbly, I hope I'm still very humble and I try to practice humility and gratitude and grace. But I also have a very strong sense of self and center and confidence
Mm.
that has allowed me to to really know my self-worth.
Hmm. Yeah, let's talk a bit about that because where do you think that came from? Was it because you moved into so after you moved to America, your family lived in a tenderloin in a really small apartment, right?
Oh yeah, in a studio, 8 people in a studio.
Hmm. So what
Yeah,
was
in the
that
Tenderloin.
experience like, and how do you think that shaped who you are in terms of building your confidence and having that
I
strong work ethic?
I have to say, like, I don't recall those experiences. This is, you know, I think a lot of people would say this, and sometimes people are like blown by this, but I don't recall those being negative or even challenging experiences. I mean, we always had, I, I am our family archive, so I have all the family pictures and the family documents and stuff. So I look back on the pictures of we were in that studio apartment, and it was always, it's not the the minimalist, like Swedish style I have in my home now, but it was always clean. It was always orderly. There was always an order to things, right? So even though there was 7 of us in the studio apartment, my uncle slept in a closet. We had a sofa bed that we pulled out every night. We had mattresses in the closet that we took out and put on the floor. There was still routine, right? And there was still order to things. So I think while and also I'm a child, so I don't understand the external world and what other people have. I know my world and my bubble, right? So it wasn't like I wish I had my own room or this or that. What I knew in my world was that I had parents that were there for me. I had dinner with my family. That there was structure to there was a certain amount of structure to things. There was also a lot that was not structured, and sometimes I joke that I was raised like a wild wolf sometimes, but there was enough structure, right? And there was enough people around me that gave me. I always say, especially during shelter in place and COVID, we need pillars in our tents. We need anchor points, And I think with us not having a lot of the anchor points with working from home and stuff, that some of us feel lost. But I do have to say, even with like living in a studio apartment, living in a somewhat dicey neighborhood, I still had really strong pillars in my life that kept me grounded.
Was there
Does if that
someone in particular who was in charge of the order and the structure and keeping the pillars up in your family, or
I don't think
was it you?
I don't
You say.
honestly, I don't think yeah, I don't think there was, right? I think, and then here's the thing. The thing is, like, I have 4 brothers and sisters, right? Well, there's 5 of us. All of us are so incredibly different, right? So I speak about my experience, but I speak about my experience through my lens. That's always something that I wanna be really mindful of as I become an adult and in my relationships with my siblings, right? Like they don't have the same experience as I do. They were a different age. They have a different relationship with my parents. So some of it is my experience and some of it is me, right? So some people in when I have some siblings that wish that they had more, right? I had some siblings that wish that they had more structure, but for some reason with my particular type of personality, I like to create structure to this very day.
Mhm.
That's part of a big part of my job. I create systems and structure for people, so they can, hopefully be set up for success at my work. So I think something innate in my personality. I mean, we always joke. when I was growing up. And to this day, still, that I go and I organize my mother's closet. For some reason, it's just something about my personality. I do think there's a little bit of nature and a little bit of nurture. Like I like to create structure. So in a certain way, it challenged me from a very young age to have to create some of the structure and goal setting myself.
I see. So do you think that your experience having to be the person to build that structure growing up for your family help you discover your purpose in life? Was there like a time when you realized, oh, this is what I'm really good at and what speaks deeply to me, and this is the career I want to pursue? Was there something in your mind that went through like that?
I don't know. I think I wish it was that like aha poignant moment, but honestly, it's not. I think a lot of us, as successful in my mind as I have been in my career and as lucky as I have been, I wish it was that linear. It's not, honestly. I think for a lot of us,
Mhm.
sometimes it's just trial and error. Sometimes it's just I think for me, what I will always say, and when my therapist and I have discussed for many years, is that um, I think a lot of people think I'm much more disciplined than I am, right? I think I'm very organized. I'm very neat. I, pardon my French, but I get shit done.
Mhm.
I think I'm on. I think I'm everybody's emergency contact. Um, I think even when I date a new man, within 3 months somehow I'm their emergency contact. Like so. I mean, that's just kind of the personality I am. And I think that has to do with the fact that my parents were there, but they were very busy. They worked many jobs. They had four other kids to take care of, and they had their own trauma. Right. I think as adults we really have to get over ourselves to a certain extent. Um, our parents are adults when they were having kids who have go through their own trauma. Can you imagine having to pick up your whole life and your family and your status, and then going to live in a refugee camp, and how traumatizing that is for them, and now they're in this new country where they don't speak the language. So I think we just have to, give our parents much more empathy and compassion than we sometimes want, right? Because we want our parents to be perfect. So, um, so my parents were dealing with their own trauma, and I don't know. I don't. I think but the one thing I always knew is that my parents thought I was pretty darn great, right? Even if they were not always there, like physically, or the fact that they couldn't help me, right? They don't speak the language and things like that, so they couldn't help me with schoolwork. I just had to do things myself, and to a certain extent, like that. That was not the best to this very day. I wish I was more disciplined. Honestly, Wing, I I I used to joke about this when I was younger, but I never did homework,
Mm.
because I didn't have to. Because in my household, my parents were working or they were out. Like we didn't have to sit down and do homework at a certain time. We didn't have desks, right? So you kind of had to parent yourself for we um I think most people in my life know this. I'm a horrible, horrible sleeper. Yeah. Because I never had a bedtime. You
Mm.
know, I would sometimes stay up all night and go to school the next day. Most days when I was a child, I wouldn't go to sleep until like 2, 3. I think the rest of my siblings were sleeping. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I didn't necessarily have like routine and discipline that much as a child. So at least with me, and into my adulthood, I just learned how to do a lot of things with like brute force. I I'm not as disciplined as I want to be, but I'm very in the most humble way. I think I'm very powerful and I will get things done and I'm very determined. Right.
Yes.
So so I think so I think as far as my childhood experiences, because I didn't have that discipline, and I didn't have the monetary or time support of my parents, and or just they couldn't help me with my homework or go, just things that they couldn't do as much as even if they wanted to. I had to you would love this word. I had to manifest, and I had to, like, to a certain extent, use my brute force to make these things happen. Like applying for college, no one helped me apply for college. I did that all by myself. I didn't even I don't even talk about this because it's just so normal, right? And I think maybe it's normal to a lot of immigrant children. I didn't talk to anybody about my college application. I just did it myself. I got
Hmm.
my letters, I got my offers, and I picked what college I wanted to go to, right?
Yeah. So
So
let's talk about that. Like, how did you discover like what college major you wanted to go pursue, and then like after college, how did you decide what you wanted to do? Like, how did you get from there to where you are today, where you are pretty
uh,
much living your purpose? Would you say?
the one thing I will say around purpose is that purpose is not about what you do,
Hmm.
right? It's not about what job title you
Right.
have,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because what I do now I never thought I would be doing what I did now, right? I think from a very young age, I thought I would always like be a lawyer.
Mm.
I think everybody always thought Yensing would be a lawyer. I love to talk. I love to argue. um, I love, I love, to help people who may not have the support they need in the justice system. So what I do now is not necessarily what I thought I was going to do. So I mean, so that but it's still what I want to do. I still talk to people all the time. I still help people that I feel like need a little bit more of an extra step, right? So I think first and foremost, I think I'm never hung up on my title. To this day, I say to everybody on my team that like you have as much ownership of this agency as I do, no matter what your title is. So you know, but I still have my purpose. My purpose is being of service, and but at the same time, something that's really like endemic in the nonprofit field and its service work is the fact that like that's not the end all and be all, right? You have to also make sure that that the agency that you're working for and the mission that you're working for is serving you still. I call it, what's the term I used to say? Oh, it's like you shouldn't let any agency or any cause emotionally blackmail you. You know, like your life shouldn't you shouldn't be a martyr, right? This should still be serving you as well while you are being of service. So, and I feel like um, I'm sorry. Can you? I feel like I'm going on a tangent, but as far as how I got to how I am now,
And
so
actually,
I went to
you touched upon something. You mentioned that you identify your purpose as being of service.
yeah.
So when did you realize that is your purpose? Like, was it like a slow process where you discovered, or did you always know that?
I don't know. I think me putting words to it has been more recent, right? Um, I so I think I don't think I always knew it. I don't think I always knew it, even if it was what I was doing. Um, I think I grew up in a very there's a pretty large Laotian community, and just other communities of families I grew up with. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you want to do something that you're good at, right? And and I think probably part of it is like, being part of a larger family and a larger extended family, that knowing, even though I'm very self sufficient, sometimes too self sufficient, and I don't ask for help, everybody needs help. Right, everybody needs help. Like as self sufficient as I think I am, I would not get to where I am if I didn't get the help and the support and the leg up that I got. So sometimes when people come from less affluent backgrounds and they become more affluent, they forget how they got there and all the support that they got. People, like memory is very short sometimes when people become an adult. The other thing I will also say that I really value, and I hope that I that I practice this as much. It's generosity. I think as poor as my family were sometimes, there was always a sense of generosity. I never felt like my parents were cheap or people around me were cheap. Like, we were not rich, but we still had like amazing, elaborate 8-course meals. There was always a sense of like generosity and abundance in my life and in my childhood, especially around food. As you know, I my other job is to eat food. Like all I do is eat and share food. So I felt like there's always a sense of generosity and that ran through my childhood and all my life, and I feel like that is probably like a core of my purpose to dedicate myself to service, because it's all, in honesty, it's about being generous.
I've always thought that you have like, yeah, like, as you said, like a really strong will to get things done, and you're not afraid to, make things happen. But not everyone's like that. Some people are too, scared to ask even. So what made you, would you say, c- have this strong strength that makes it possible for you to do all these things and not be afraid of pursuing them?
I mean, I'm gonna have to echo back to what I said earlier about, like, studies have shown this. Studies have shown that kids who have at least one strong relationship with an adult growing up, are healthier adults. I have to say that even though my parents are not perfect, they're very crazy a lot of times. I always felt, I always felt loved by them,
Hmm.
right? To have a sense, to have that in your center, that you are valued and that people think that you are great from a young age. And by no means did they spoil me. Oh my God, far from it. And by no means did they laud me all the time, but I always knew that they thought I was pretty darn great. Not that I was perfect by any means, or not that I shouldn't do my chores, or not that all this stuff, but but they didn't talk down to me. Um, when I remember this one situation when I was in school, and I got in trouble. I forgot what I got in trouble for. And I did have to have a parent conference, and my dad did come, and he defended me,
Hmm.
I think to have someone, even through a translator at the time, because he couldn't speak English, like he still, like, even though he was listening to the concerns, like he defended me, and he still thought I was great, you
Oh, that's
know?
great.
So I
What
know.
did you
So I think,
do, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't know. You know me. Sometimes I can be a little like challenging to authority.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I talk back or something. I'm not very, even in seventh or sixth grade, I'm not the shyest person. So
Hmm.
I think maybe I talk back or something like that.
So how did he
So
defend you against those charges?
well, I think my mother is a very strong personality. She's, so I get a lot of that from her. She doesn't take no for an answer a lot. But on the other hand, my dad is a very he's a very more soft spoken person, right? So I think, he's not, you know as as powerful as I can be. I don't go beyond an 8, right? On a scale of 1 to 10. I don't I don't waste my time yelling. I don't waste my time arguing that much. I don't waste my time on people that are not, that I'm not going to get anywhere with, or they're not worth my time. And I think some of that comes from my dad. It's like he's more even keeled. So I think, like he didn't raise his voice. He wasn't like upset. He wasn't angry. I see that, unfortunately, sometimes with a lot of the parents I work with, they're so, they get too rash, or verbose or aggressive when their kids are not behaving. So that was never really part of my upbringing. So I wasn't yelled at a lot or talked down to. And and honestly, that really and then working with children every day, that really has such a strong impact on who they become as an adult, and who and how they value themselves.
So, Yensing, as you know, 2020 was the year of the COVID-19. So how did
Ugh,
that,
yeah.
yeah, how did that affect you and your organization? And tell us more about how you stay sane during this period.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So in my agency, the vast majority of our services, I mean, I would say all of our services, we have 30 programs, and all the services are in person. You know, uh, Preschool, childcare, play groups, support groups, they're all in person. After school programs, case management, transitioning the team and the community virtually, has been an adventure, to say the least. I have staff that don't have a computer. I have staff that don't have Wi-Fi. Um, so I think this is where some of my strengths come into play. I hate change. I hate change. But I'm very good at it. I'm very good at change. I'm a really good planner. I'm very determined. I'm a very good cheerleader, and I try to set a clear game plan for everybody. So it was a lot of work, sending supplies home for staff, doing trainings. Luckily, we have funders that are very committed to us that continue with their commitments and their contracts with us while our programs were closed and while we made transitions. But I'm very proud of my staff and my team and our children and the families we work with. And we have, we have an amazing array of virtual programs. And we started, have one program going back in person a month ago. But I have to say, in some situations like this, you have to really be a leader and you really have to be the one holding the flag, right? I work with an amazing HR consultant who consults with a lot of different nonprofits. Um, and she often said, "Wow, like you are the only one who's really, you know, encouraging all your teams and all your programs to go online." And I think sometimes people were in a little bit of disarray and they didn't know what was going on. And and again, I'll acknowledge my privileges, and I'm tech savvy. I'm very comfortable working from home. I'm very comfortable with computers, and that's not the case with some of my staff, right? Some of them, like I said, don't have computers. One person said in the last 3 months when we first started it, this is the most she's ever used a computer in her whole life. And now she teaches class every day on Zoom, and
Wow.
she's so engaging. You can go to our Facebook page and you can see her on our Facebook Live videos. So I mean, like, now look at that now. Like, now she's doing Facebook Live videos. Isn't that amazing? These are times that really test you as a leader. Um, you have to know that when everybody else is kind of running around confused or not knowing what they need to do, you need to be supportive, but also really strong. Um, and and I think eventually within like 2.5, 3 months, I'm so glad that I kind of pushed everybody, you know, um, because it actually made them feel so much better. Right? They actually knew what they were going to do for work. They actually had a sense of purpose, and they were still doing their work. And we were still supporting them. And clearly, we're not teaching for 8 hours. We're doing hour and a half classes because that's the most you can have a kid on a screen. Um, but but it gave them a sense, it gave them those pillars. I think everybody lost those pillars, these foundational, like, cornerstones of what is work, what is life. And you really have to help reestablish those.
So I want to take a step back and ask you some questions for
Hmm.
practical advice to those
Hmm.
for those who want to pursue a career in service in the nonprofit
Yeah.
world. And one
Hmm.
of the biggest issues is always financial concerns in this field.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
what kind of advice would you give to someone who's interested in this field, and how should they sustain themselves financially for the long term?
um, I think I'm sorry to go on a bit of a tangent, but I think the bigger question that you're asking too is just how we. I mean, I view, I'm the executive director of a nonprofit, right? I work with a lot of other executive directors on a very regular basis. I think the first conversation we need to have in general is, why do we not pay nonprofit staff enough, right? Like, I know I can pay my staff better, and I've made a commitment within my agency to bring everybody up to a living wage within the next year and a half. So I think first and foremost, we need to have a real conversation about how we pay nonprofit staff. Um, and that, these are things that are within our control. Like, we act like they're not within our control. I mean, it's, as someone who has been a director in a nonprofit for over 15 years, like, these are things that we can control. Like, we don't have to pay people like poverty wages. Like these are false, like myths that we created in ourselves. Because the thing that I would say to you is that I've worked in nonprofits for most of my adult career. I've always had a fair living wage, right? Because I advocated for myself. I knew my self worth, right? So so I think that's the other thing, that there are nonprofits that pay well, right? And we have to start expecting that to change the culture. One time I was writing a grant and I had a program officer say to me, "Wow, you're going to pay a coordinator this much?" And I said, "Yes, of course I am. That's not even like what you need to make to be, like, not low income in San Francisco." She thought it was kind of crazy that we would pay a coordinator. I think it was at the time it was like $57,000, which is nothing in San Francisco. Like $57,000 is low income. For you to be like not low income in San Francisco as one adult, not God forbid you have kids, you have to make at least $60,000 a year. And so you have to be willing to stand up for yourself. And if you are a leader in a nonprofit, stand up to other people and help raise the bar of what nonprofit and people should be making, right?
Mhm.
So, I think it's harder said than done. Because unfortunately there are jobs that don't pay well, right? So I think you have to know that there are places that pay well, right? And those places that don't pay well, eventually, hopefully, they will increase their wages because there's no one applying for their jobs. You know,
Mhm.
so I mean, especially in San Francisco, I don't know about a lot of other places, but there are a lot of nonprofits. I've worked at many of them. I partner with many of them, and they do pay well. They pay a living wage. You can make a good, decent wage in San Francisco. I mean, obviously, you can't compete with people working at Apple and Google and things like that. But you don't have to adhere to this false myth that just because you work in a nonprofit, you have to be poor.
Mhm. Yeah. And so how does someone get into the nonprofit world? What's like the first step they should be taking? And once they're in it, how does one thrive? What advice would you give them?
Ooh, that's I think the nonprofit world is big. Like it that's a big generalization. So even you work in tech. Every tech industry, I mean, every tech corporation is different, you may say. So I think that's a hard question to answer sometimes, because I've worked at many different nonprofits and they're all vastly different,
Mhm.
right? So um I think obviously, like, just basic career advice in general. Um, you have to have at least some volunteer or internship experience. You can't assume that, I have people who are like PhDs and MBAs and all this stuff apply for our jobs. And like, I'm like, no, thank you, because you have no experience. you know so you have to have some relevant experience, even if that's an internship. Or even if even if you don't have a BA, right? Or even if you have a PhD or MBA, or like, I'm not going to hire you if I feel like you don't have any relevant transferable experiences. um, so no matter where you are in your education or your career, like, you have to have some transferable, relatable experience. So you have to, volunteer, do an internship, something. So that's always the first step. I mean, I've transitioned jobs where they were completely different from jobs that I've done. I worked at uh, I worked at an organization that did mainly a lot of advocacy for LGBT families, and then I went to run a homeless shelter. Those things are not necessarily very in a line, right? But at least I was able to speak to how my experiences were translatable. Working with families, working with people who were different enfranchised, working with people, a lot of LGBT families actually make much less than straight heterosexual families. So being able to speak about how those experiences align with your new experience. So you have to have relatable experience. I mean, at the end of the day, people can have all this stuff, and all the degrees, but like, they can't do the job.
So what's like one advice you would give someone who is trying to find or work towards their purpose in your field?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in my field, um, I'm gonna give one. I'm gonna give a couple pieces of advice for my field, and then I'm gonna give a piece of advice in general. I think I think in my field, I would say, going back to what we said earlier, I think sometimes in social service work, like, you have to be mindful of not getting burnout and not falling into the emotional blackmail trap, right? That you should be doing this work, that you should be working so much harder than you need to. I mean, we all work really hard, but you should be working like 7 days or getting paid shit because you're doing it for the cause, right? We're all doing it for the cause, but at some point you need to take care of yourself as well, right? And there are agencies and there are like teams that really value that, right? So, I always say that family support at our agency needs to also be reflected in our staff and how we treat our staff, right? So sometimes in the nonprofit field, people get burned out and things like that. So But you need to know that there are other like nonprofits and agencies that do value taking care of their staff and things like that, and that you can advocate for that. And that we're not just supposed to be like doing it for the cause and only the cause, right? Because at some point you're going to get burnt out. Um, and that yeah, so that's one piece of advice I would give for my field. What's another piece of advice? I mean, I think in general, I think a general piece of advice in my field that's applicable to all fields, is knowing your. It's I mean, obviously, there's just certain things like working hard and things like that, and having a positive attitude. Kind of like the lady who's working at the bakery that I mentioned. If you have a positive attitude, it's gonna make your day so much better, right? And I mean, I'm not saying every job is perfect, right? Some jobs are really shitty. You and I have known each other for many years, and someone should interview you because you've had a very interesting career path, and some of the places you work with were crazy, right? But I think one thing about you that demonstrates is that even when you were working at the craziest jobs, you still had a positive attitude and you had a plan, right, of how you were to move forward, right? So even if the job that you're working at is not where you want to be, or if it's not a good place to be working at, and if it's toxic, don't fall into the rabbit hole of that toxicity. Create a plan. Even if you are working at a horrible McDonald's and you really feel like you have no other option, can you work at another McDonald's? Is the McDonald's down the street a better work environment? Is that manager better, right? I think people need to know their self-worth, and they need to know that they have some control over their own careers and their own professional path, right?
Mm.
And I'm going to own my privilege. And I have to say it's easier for me, right? Because I'm a citizen, I'm documented, I speak the language, I have degrees, I'm financially stable. I'm going to own my own privilege. And that for some people, they don't have that, right? And I understand that it's really challenging when you don't have these things. But even if you can do something little, and if you have a plan, for just change in your life, you can do it, right? I even say this to my own staff. You have so much more control than you think, right? I think even if I'm not doing what I thought I would be doing, I've always felt a certain level. Even when I haven't necessarily been the happiest person in my job, I've always felt a certain level of control of what I do. I know that I'm still at this job because of this reason or that reason, even if I am not happy for this reason or that reason. I know why I'm making my choices, and I know what my next steps can possibly be. Right. I think sometimes people just fall into this rabbit hole of just feeling so powerless and like they have no control. And a you have much more control over your career and your job than you think, right? And I work with families who are undocumented, who are being financially abused by their employers, and all this stuff, right? So I recognize all those challenges, right? And even with them, with those families, like, and with clients I've worked with that are in those really difficult situations, we have been able to find, resource for them to get out of those situations and into better situations.
Mm. Oh, that sounds great. All right, so thank you so much for answering all those questions. So we are
Yeah.
gonna move on to the last lightning round part of the
Okay.
show. So I'm just gonna ask you some rapid fire questions, so you can just answer them with one or two words if you want. So, what
Okay.
is
We'll
one
do.
thing you like to do to relax?
I'm a yoga fiend, so I love my yoga.
Mm. And what is one thing you like to do for fun?
Hmm. I there are so many things I like to do for fun. One thing I like to do for fun is talk to fun people like you.
Yay. What is one habit you're currently working on?
I'm trying to have less, right? I really realized that having less has freed up my life so much. Like I feel it's just so amazing to have less stuff.
Yeah, yeah, really lightens. I mean, makes us feel so much lighter with
Oh yeah,
your life.
physically,
Hmm.
emotionally, financially, all that stuff. It's like it's I'm still working on it.
Hmm.
I still have a long way to go, but oh my god, it's and I've never been a hoarder, but just having less stuff is just like I've never felt richer. Honestly, like
Yeah.
I mean. I've never felt like I've had more when I've had less.
I totally agree. I know what you mean. And what is one habit you would like to have?
I want to be more disciplined. I know that as I get older, I can't always stay up, 48 hours, or I can't always run like 15 miles. I know that in the long term, I'm going to have to be more disciplined. And I know, like in my yoga, I can't get into a handstand by just brute force and my arm strength. I know it has to do with skill and strategy and discipline and making sure my core is tight and all that stuff. Like, I can't just power my way through everything as I get older. I have to be more disciplined.
Mm.
Yeah.
And if you have one superpower, what would you pick?
Oh my gosh. Hmm. You think like I hear this question all the time and that I would have an answer. Um, oh gosh, my superpower. Um, I'm a little like I'm a little bit of like you may know I'm a little bit of like a health fiend. So I would want to be just like I mean I'm pretty strong, but I don't know. I want to just I want to be able to run like 300 miles. I don't know. I want to like feel like the full euphoria of being like crazy strong. I don't know if that's I think that's a superpower because I think I can obtain it actually. It's not
Yeah,
far fetched. So
yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
I want to I want to be really really strong and really really healthy.
So
Yeah.
superpower strength, superwoman.
Yeah, I'm pretty strong now, but I don't know. It's a little addicting too. Sometimes you just want to be stronger and be faster and run longer, but I don't think I've reached my peak yet,
Mm,
right? I
mhm,
feel like I still need to work to gain my and I mean I don't want to like I mean, I'm too old anyways. I'm not trying to join Olympics or whatever. I want to get to a state where I feel really content with my physical health. You
mhm.
know?
Yeah. And how would you describe your ideal life?
Oh, hmm. Um, I think that's a really hard question because I don't think like I think it's not about an ideal life, right? I think that's a hard question to answer because I think it's more about like where you are at different stages and how you feel about it. I think my ideal life is being content, you know, where you are in the current stage of your life, like in you know, like you know, whether you are traveling in a van across the country or whether are, in a home with 12 kids and dogs and chickens, like I think your ideal life is just really being content of where you are. And you're not always going to be happy. You're going to have frustrations, but I say I just try to live my life with grace and gratitude. So that's my
Mhm.
ideal life.
And that's a good answer. Just appreciating the present moment, and that is your present moment is what sparks joy. Basically, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think totally like yes. I think that's a great way to put it. I think just being present and being content. And I'm not saying that means that you don't have like dreams and goals and things like that, but that's part of being content, right? Having dreams and goals.
Yeah. And lastly, is there anything you want the listeners to do or know?
Oh, oh gosh. That's a big question. So this podcast is more about work, right?
Could be, yeah,
Or just in general?
in general.
Mm, in general. Well, you know what I this is I'll keep it small because that's such a big question. What been trying to do is at least give three people a compliment a day, right? Like it's free, it's so easy to do, and don't lie and don't fake, don't don't tell someone your hair is super beautiful when it's not. But it's so easy to find three things to compliment somebody about. You know, like I'll compliment you and say, I had a really great time talking to you on this podcast, and thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you
Like
for
I
joining.
genuinely believe that, right? And I genuinely hold that. And it makes the other person feel so much better. It makes you feel so much better. So I would just challenge everybody to give, three people a compliment each day for the next week.
Awesome. Well, those are great um, suggestions for our listeners. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Yensing, on the first episode of A Work in Purpose. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And and hopefully your first episode wasn't too painful. Hopefully you'll continue to do many more.
Well, I'm sure we will. All right.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
All right, so here are some key takeaways from this episode. When it comes to finding one's purpose, everyone's path is different. It's never a straight line. For Yensing, coming from a refugee family to America, her parents were often working and trying to figure things out themselves, which meant there wasn't a lot of structure when Yensing was growing up, so she had to learn to create her own and get things done on her own. Yet, she and her family also got a lot of support and generosity from her community of other Laotian families, which looking back shaped the core of her purpose of giving back by being generous and to be of service to others. Now, as the executive director for a family service organization, she's using the life skills she had to learn on her own growing up to create stable structures for other families so they too can now thrive. It is only from doing what she is doing now that Yensing realized that, yes, this is her purpose. And that's our first episode. Wow, I've been thinking and planning to release this podcast since like July, and I can't believe it is finally launched. To be honest, there have been so many times when a part of me told me, why bother? It's just an idea. You've never launched a podcast before. And who do you think you are to make a podcast about purpose? But then I constantly reminded myself of this powerful quote by Marianne Williamson from her book A Return to Love. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world, and as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And that's just such a powerful reminder to keep for those of us who are on this journey in discovering and reaching our purpose. Who are we not to be shining bright in this world? I hope you've enjoyed this first episode. I'm excited to continue to nurture, improve, and grow a working purpose and to share more inspiring stories and what I'll be learning along the way. But I cannot do it alone. I need your help and support to grow our podcast. Please subscribe, tell your friends about it, rate it 5 stars, or even recommend some awesome guests to me at wing@aworkingpurpose.com or visit the website aworkingpurpose.com. Please also join our community on Facebook where we can spark discussions and support one another in our progress towards our purpose. You have my greatest gratitude for listening. May your present moment, now and forever, be filled with light and love. Until next time, this is Wing from A Work in Purpose.